The public pen has gained exclusive access to a set of documents being circulated among leftist groups in North Alabama that give them instructions on how to violently intervene if ICE officers or other peace officers are attempting to arrest a subject. This set of dangerous and inflammatory files was intercepted from a private chat room that is used by members of groups such as the Democratic Socialists of America, North Alabama chapter, and members of Alabama 50501. These are some of the people behind most of the protests we've seen in recent weeks in this part of the state. I want to take a moment to walk you through some of the most interesting elements of it. They call it the de-arrest primer. If you'd like to see the whole document, I'm going to upload it to our LinkTree. You can find that link in our description. But I just want to highlight a few parts of it. So they begin by defining a de-arrest. What is a de-arrest? Well, according to the people who wrote this, it's the act of freeing someone who has been seized by law enforcement officers. In other circles, this is known as a jailbreak, something you're not supposed to be doing. The book then goes on to give 4 separate tactics for de-arresting, the first being the gable grip. It says you are supposed to hug the arrestee and pull them out of danger, and the accompanying illustration shows 2 officers with their face mask visors down trying to arrest what looks like a black man, and then you see 2 white figures behind him trying to pull him out of the officer's grasp. This seems like a really good way to get hurt. And they are clear, this is no gentle pulling. In fact, they say that holding the arrestee around the torso or abdomen is preferred to grabbing their limbs because you may dislocate their limbs from pulling so hard if you grab them on the limb. So grab them by the torso. This is not a gentle practice. This is violent, and it's a great way to get yourself hurt, by the way. Tactic 2 proceeds, and this is even more violent. It involves pulling and pushing an officer off an arrestee and or breaking their grip on an arrestee. And it tells you how you can break the grip. It says you should have a low center of gravity and a wide base and push with an explosive power with your head up at all times if possible. You could also try pulling the officer off using a similar tactic to tactic 1. It says for breaking a grip, try striking the grip. And this image shows a person, one person has jumped on the back of the police officer who's arresting the black man. And then the other person who's doing the de-arrest has his fist raised to strike the arm of the arresting police officer. The book even suggests taking a couple months of grappling classes or setting up more targeted grappling games with your comrades to practice the maneuvers. This is clear violent intent. This is not ambiguous at all. And they fully admit, by the way, that this will get you charged with assault in court. It says for breaking a grip, try striking it. All that being said, you can see why this could be construed as assault in court. Construed, buddy. This is... The word construed is doing a lot of work here. It's pretty obvious. You have an illustrated manual with a step-by-step guide showing you putting your fist up to bring it down on the officer's arm. There's no construing here. This is very obvious. They move on to tactic 3, and this one's a little more surreptitious and also still illegal, though. It says LEOs will leave their patrol cars or prisoner transport vans unlocked from time to time. Even when there's arrestees sitting in the vehicles, open the door of one of these vehicles and let the arrestees out. Of course, this could be considered a crime. Yeah, you think? That's a big time crime. You're going to go to jail for that. And then tactic 4 says you can totally surround the officers who have the arrestee or otherwise block them and or their vehicle chanting, "Let them go," until the LEOs cave to the mounting pressure. So this is mob tactics. And when you're dealing with a riot, this is very dangerous. This is not a crowd of high schoolers who are just chanting excitedly. This is a riotous mob who's clearly already shown a willingness to jump on a law enforcement officer's back, hit him violently, and pull with enough force to dislocate limbs. To be surrounded in a case like this is highly dangerous. And if you are able to pressure a law enforcement officer to release a criminal, you've made him fear for his life. And you are playing a dangerous game when you make an officer fear for his life, as Alex Preddy found out the other day. The document proceeds to define a de-arrest in more philosophical terms, where they say each de-arrest is a shaking off, which is to say each one is a micro-intifada, which can spread and inspire others until we may finally shake off this noxious ruling order altogether. They're not hiding the ball here. They view a de-arrest as part of a much broader effort to overturn the ruling order. They believe that what they're doing is to participate in a rebellion that could ideally spread and inspire others. They don't care that this is inflammatory. They know it's inflammatory. They want it to be inflammatory. They want it to spread. And they invoke the language of an intifada, which is interesting and tells you whoever wrote this may have had some exposure to the Free Palestine movement. In the Intifada were violent uprisings of Palestinian Muslims in the West Bank and in Gaza in the past few decades, each of which resulted in hundreds of lives lost, very dangerous and violent riots and civil unrest bordering on all-out war. And so for them to invoke that as their intent in a de-arrest is troubling, to say the least. And then they decide to really reveal where they're coming from politically. And we could see the political alignment of whoever wrote this document, because they give a reason why you might want to de-arrest someone. It says being arrested can have drastic negative life-altering effects, especially for targeted populations, like people who aren't white, Muslims, LGBTQ people, and certain radicals. And because getting arrested can be such a pain for them, we need to jailbreak them. So this is very, very troubling stuff that is actively being circulated and utilized by local garden variety leftists in Huntsville. And I say garden variety because I know who these people are. I've seen them. They're radical in what they believe, but they're certainly not radical in their appearance. They are everywhere out there at No Kings protests, at Free Palestine rallies, at protests against ICE. This is the material that they're consuming. And as a result, is it any wonder that violence is at an all-time high on the left? The final point I want to highlight is an indictment of every soft-on-crime politician who's ever walked a hall of a legislature. This book, which openly advocates for crime, points out catch-and-release policies as a benefit to their cause of crime. It says being arrested, jailed, and catching charges are all awful experiences, but many, if not all, protest arrests are catch and release. And they're saying that this is an argument in favor of just doing it anyway because it's worth it. Do you see what's happening here? Our soft-on-crime politicians have made a permissive environment for people like this to suggest you should do awful and dangerous things because the politicians will let you off the hook for it. You'll get a slap on the wrist, but you'll be out the same day. You can go home and have dinner with your family. The best way to stop this? Write harsher, more extreme laws that make penalties for these types of behaviors so extreme that the next edition of this book warns anyone against ever trying them ever again. We want it so that people who commit these types of crimes feel lucky if they end up in a jail cell at the end of the day.